Welcome to Outdoorsy, the podcast where we are redefining what the word outdoorsy means and reclaiming it for everyone. I'm your host, Madeline. I am excited to introduce a guest who is really breaking barriers and reshaping the outdoor industry, Andy Neal. Andy is a plus-size model, content creator, producer, social media influencer, all the things. He's got a huge following on Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok, where his content has gone viral multiple times. He has worked with major national brands like REI, Eddie Bauer, and Columbia, and more, creating content that speaks really to inclusivity and representation in outdoor spaces. His influence doesn't stop at social media, though. He's also a producer and serves on the board of directors at the Ashland Independent Film Festival. With degrees in digital cinema and religious studies, his diverse background really fuels his creativity and advocacy. I personally love Andy's content. It is phenomenal. One of the areas that he is the most passionate about is this intersection of mental health and the outdoors. So I cannot wait to dive into Andy's journey, the impact of his work, and how he's really working to create a more inclusive outdoor community as a whole. So Andy, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So let's just start off with, the first question, which is how do you define outdoorsy?
Going outside. I get asked that all the time, and because there's this perceived notion of what it means to be outdoorsy. You're wearing a certain kind of shoes, certain kind of clothes, you're driving a certain kind of vehicle, you live in a certain place in the country. If you live in a city, it's certain cities, it's Denver, it's Portland, it's Seattle. And for me, being outdoorsy is enjoying the outdoors, going outside. It doesn't have a necessarily specific, attire you have to wear or geographical location or particular activity. It could be as simple as enjoying green spaces in a large metropolitan area you live in. It could be hiking the Pacific Crest Trail. It's whatever you want it to be.
I cannot agree more. I think that has been such a common thread with all these interviews. There hasn't been a single person that's come on and been like, well, in order to be outdoorsy, you must do X, Y, and Z. Everybody's just like, do you enjoy being outdoors? Cool.
Exactly.
That's it.
It doesn't matter. I mean, and I think so much of the idea of being outdoorsy is marketed to us by brands, by, the media. It's like, oh, to be outdoorsy, this is what an outdoorsy person looks like. They're walking around wearing chacos and, no, it's enjoying the outdoors. It's being outside. It's however that works for you. I know outdoorsy people who live, in Manhattan. And there are outdoorsy people who live out in rural Southern Oregon where I live. Outdoorsy is what you make it.
I cannot agree more. So I would love to dive into kind of how you relate to the outdoorsy world as a whole. Tell us about your journey a little bit, just initially getting into the outdoorsy world. Did you grow up loving the outdoors? Is it something you learned later in life? Tell me about how you got into hiking and outdoor adventures.
I was a stereotypical city kid. If you think of a city kid, you think of me. I grew up in Southern California and Las Vegas, Nevada. Never really got in the outdoors. Was never really taken into the outdoors. Maybe camped 2 or 3 times as a kid. I think we visited Yosemite and the Grand Canyon each, and that's the only kind of outdoorsy things I can remember as a kid. And growing up, I really just didn't have the outdoors. I was a city kid. When I met my wife, she's from Southern Oregon. She had moved to Las Vegas to get a teaching position. We got married, and then in 2007, when the economy collapsed in Vegas first, particularly, we moved to Oregon, and I was hating life here because in Southern Oregon, everybody was kind of outdoorsy, and just in that they were always going to the river or going camping. And for me, I was just like, no, like bugs, and also just adjustment from big city life, especially a town like Las Vegas, to small town life where things closed at 6:00. And I'm like, it's only 6. Why is this store closed? And so I had a really hard time adjusting to it. And the journey of the outdoors took a long time. During that time, just a little background, I grew up conservative evangelical Southern Baptist, was very close-minded. Then became a youth pastor. I was a youth pastor and music pastor for 15 years. Very conservative. People in my church were voting for Trump and other candidates. Very just anti-LGBTQ, the whole deal. And over time, that way of thinking just began to not sit right with me. and we moved to Oregon. I was still serving as a pastor. I'd gone to Bible college in Portland, had a degree in religious studies, and was working as a pastor here in Southern Oregon, and just things weren't sitting right with me. And so eventually it was the same for my wife. I was at a youth group where I was a youth pastor, where working there full time, where we had a lot of LGBTQ teens coming, and they just wanted positive adults in their lives. And I was seeing this and talking with them, interacting with them, and was realizing like this issue is way more complicated than what my faith and religion makes it out to be. And over time, I just was like, this isn't for me anymore. And I left my church, I left my position, and it was messy. It was hard. My wife at the same time basically said, I think I'm an atheist. I don't believe this. This isn't working. They're saying one thing and doing another. So we and our family, we left, and we had adopted 3 kids from foster care at the time, 2 with special needs, who had been abused and neglected in every way you can think of by their biological parents before we adopted them. And I just left the job I had and decided to go to film school at Southern Oregon University. And I was able to get a second bachelor's degree. It took me 2 years. Southern Oregon University, though it is a public university, is basically a very liberal arts college. And I was exposed to things I was told to stay away from as an evangelical, things that I told others to stay away from, and just a whole new light and perspective kind of just illuminated my thinking, and was really just kind of changed, and graduated from film school with a completely different person, and just kind of floundered. I didn't want to move to Los Angeles. I had a film degree now. Didn't want to move to Atlanta. I wanted to stay in Southern Oregon. There is somewhat of a film industry here. Films like Wild were filmed here, which is the Pacific Crest Trail. Cheryl Strayed, her book, good majority of the film was filmed in Southern Oregon, in Ashland. So I knew there was people here. So I was just doing whatever work I could. There was a Kia commercial I filmed here. I worked on that, all kinds of stuff, but just was floundering until the pandemic happened, and it was like, oh crap, can't do anything, and was just floundering. No work, nothing. But through all of that, I was going to therapy, and I was talking to my therapist about how I just graduated film school. I didn't know what I was doing in my life. I didn't want to move. And my entire life, I had this something bigger than myself that had all the answers. There was this higher power, whatever you want to call it. And I didn't have that anymore because I had left Christianity. I had left my evangelical faith behind. I had left my career behind. And she just looked at me and she's like, why don't you try going for a hike? We live in one of the most beautiful places in the world. And I'm like, well, I've never considered myself outdoorsy. I'll do it. So I found a trail outside of town, and it was a little path along the Pacific Crest Trail. Immediately fell in love with hiking. Like, oh my gosh. And like, there's a an Instagram or TikTok trending sound that said, this is going to be my personality for the rest of my life. And this literally was my personality the rest of my life. Like, I'm in love with this, and just completely fell in love with the outdoors and hiking. And it became the thing for me that really began to give me a bigger sense of purpose, of meaning. The hike was called Hobart's Bluff. It was, a mile and a half up and back, but you could see all of the Rogue Valley, which is where we're at, the valley which Ashland and Medford sits in Southern Oregon. And I was like, oh wow, this is cool. I can do this. And, I have, Mount McLaughlin on one side, Mount Shasta. You look behind me, you can see Mount Shasta behind me. Like, this is amazing. And that became what I pursued. And it was really healing for my mental health, especially as a person in a bigger body, as a plus size person, moving my body through spaces where I was told it wasn't for me. At the time, outdoor company ads didn't have bigger people in their advertising. That is changing thanks to people like my friend Jenny Brusso, who's really pushing for that. But it just felt good to be out there. I knew it was for me. Well, the pandemic happened, couldn't work, so I just started hiking more and more and more. And it really became my whole personality. And I began to see that other people like me who were in bigger bodies, other people who weren't like me, but who had been excluded from the outdoor community, those in the LGBTQ community, people of color, women, were like, yeah, I don't feel welcome here. And then I discovered Unlikely Hikers and Jenny Brusso, and was like, wow, there's a whole community here. And myself as a cis white het male, though I am in a bigger body, people do pay more attention to me. And I was like, I have a responsibility here to use my voice and platform to like say, hey, we need to open this up for everybody. Was posting things on Instagram like crazy. Eventually I got the attention of Columbia Sportswear. Andrea Kelly, who's the head of their, at the time was the head of their plus size division, reached out to me. She's like, we can't find any plus size guys who are models, who are willing to be out there. Something you'd be interested in doing. I'm like, yeah, whatever. And I went ahead like that next day and decided, you know what, I'm going to be a plus size outdoor model. And then 3 weeks later, Columbia Sportswear said, hey, we need you up at Columbia River Gorge. There's a shoot. Okay, sure. And while this is happening, I began to post about my struggles with my body. And I was diagnosed with binge eating disorder through counseling right after I graduated film school, and body dysmorphia. And to combat that, I just really did something therapeutic. I posted full body pictures of myself out in the outdoors. My friend, again, Jenny Brusso of Unlikely Hikers, got a hold of those. I reposted those. And then more people began to see, oh, wow, this guy, he's putting himself out there. And there are cishet white dudes who aren't complete bigots out there, though it is rare. I will admit that. It is rare. Who actually care about other people and are advocating for marginalized communities. And my platform just began to grow and began to get more of a following. And I was modeling for Columbia Sportswear, and things were just going really well. And then January 2022, on a whim, I saw this trend like that was called going for a stupid walk for your stupid mental health, and people were doing it in the cities. I'm like, you know what? I dropped my daughter for school. She was going to a magnet school out by the Rogue River. I'm like, I can do this really quick. I have a film school background. I know how to do angles, and shot, reverse shot, all this stuff. I'll make it really good, really crisp. I'll just post it, and maybe it'll get 10,000 views. I had never had a video on Instagram past 5,000 views. I did it, actually made a typo, uploaded it, saw the typo, took it down, re-edited it, right there at the river, posted it, hit post. Okay, it's good. Everything's good. All right. Drove away from the river, thought nothing of it. I was going to the gym. There was a 20-minute drive from the river to the gym. I got to the gym, 10,000 views already. Well, that's unusual. Got done my workout, 50,000 views. Okay. By the weekend, 500,000. By that next Tuesday, a week later, we're at 6 million. News stations are calling me. It ended up being 37 million, I think it sits at now, and it was going for a stupid hike for your stupid mental health. And at that point, brands just went, and I became a full-time outdoor mental health content creator and have fallen in love with that. And it's now my life's work and my career, encouraging all bodies to get into the outdoors, advocating for mental health issues, especially those in the marginalized communities. And it's my life's work. Hiking, outdoors, and mental health is what I do. I've got to work with some amazing people and some amazing brands, some amazing organizations, and it's just it's been a whirlwind. It's been 2.5 years, and things are still going, and I can't keep up with it. It's been really cool.
That's absolutely incredible. What a whirlwind of a journey for you. And I feel like everything you described feels like so many different eras of your life that have served you in different ways, and really everything, even the things that you've struggled with, have really led to this incredible platform that you have now today, and all these cool things that you get to do, but because you've worked so hard for it, and you've been such an advocate for people who need to have their voices heard. So, I mean, to me, I'm like, of course your content has taken off. It's so important and it resonates with so many people, but that hasn't always been the case, right? And so it's really important work that you're doing. And I'm so glad that you have had success from it, because you deserve it.
Yeah, thank you for that. I appreciate that. It's been super rewarding, and I have imposter syndrome. And this the idea that I know that because of my identity, cis het white dude, I have opportunities that others don't. And so my goal is to uplift those other voices as much as I possibly can, because there are so many voices that aren't being heard, not only in the outdoor and mental health community, but online in general. And so I want to advocate that we need to dudes like me, a lot of times we need to step aside and let other voices be heard. Use our platform to uplift others.
Yeah, I've struggled with that too. I mean, obviously, I am a white woman and I am in a straight presenting relationship and I have a significant amount of privilege. And so that's why I personally also had a lot of imposter syndrome when I started, posting more online and sharing more of my journey. And really the reason why I developed the idea for this podcast was I have all this professional experience in marketing and content creation and stuff. I might as well put it to good use and
Yeah.
start uplifting the voices and the stories of other people who are doing really awesome work. So, yeah, I feel you with that. But yeah, I think, just even you just verbalizing that is a lot more than what a lot of people even are aware of. So that's fantastic. I would love to dive into talking about this intersection of mental health and the outdoors because, you talked about how that was really healing for you. And obviously, there's a huge cross section here. There's a lot of people who go
Mhm.
to the outdoors for healing of any kind. I would love for you to just kind of talk about that intersection.
We live in such a busy culture that even if you live in rural areas that are not the city, we're constantly bombarded with notifications. And it sounds so cliche to say. And there is just something about getting in the outdoors and quieting our minds. There is something about turning everything off, about not having service, and just enjoying nature. Because we are nature. We are a part of nature. We've screwed it up a lot as human beings, as Western culture. And just sitting by a river or climbing up a mountain or, whatever it is that works for you. My daughter, she's Gen Alpha. She calls it touching grass. Um, it's, it is healing. It is therapeutic. It forces me to quiet my mind. It makes me realize that I'm a part of something bigger. One of the biggest things that how it really has affected my mental health was an experience I had the first time I went backpacking. I was backpacking along the Pacific Crest Trail. It was about a 15-mile hike. And there was one point where I looked on my map and the water sources, and there was supposed to be a water source there. And it wasn't. And we were in the middle of a pretty big drought in Southern Oregon. It's begun to subside, and this is 2 years ago. And I'm like, oh, wow. And I was about out of water. And I saw the stream here, that's supposed to be here, is not here. It's dry now. And it was early in the season. And at that moment, I realized the interconnectedness of us as humans, of nature, of our environment. That at home, it's so easy for me to turn on the tap and there's water. You flush the toilet, it goes down. When I'm in nature, you got to dig a cat hole. You got to do those things. When I'm in nature, oh, there's supposed to be water here. There's no water here. How am I supposed to survive? I was dependent on it. And we don't realize that living in Western culture, how dependent we are on the environment and nature for our survival. In that moment, I was like, wow, there's this interconnectedness here that I don't even realize. Now, I ended up finding water about a few miles down at the river, and I was fine. But this realization, like, it is hot, hotter than it should be. We're in the middle of a drought caused, perpetuated by climate change. We are having effect on the environment, and it's just that interconnectedness for me between nature and ourselves really helps me realize that I am a part of something bigger and has been profound for my mental health. So much so, that I try to be out in nature every day. That's not always possible, and I realize I live in a place where I'm extremely privileged, where I can drive 15 minutes and be on national forest land. I can drive an hour and a half away and be in a national park. I can drive 10 minutes away and be on Bureau of Land Management land by the river. But it's so therapeutic. And with that, I always tell people, while the outdoors is therapeutic and it's great for mental health, and so much so that there are Nordic countries that have doctors prescribe national park passes to their patients for their mental health, does not take the place of therapy. I often have people message me like, oh, I stopped seeing my therapist. I go to my therapist because I went for a hike and I felt great. And it's like, it solved all my problems. I'm like, no. Other people have messaged me, I stopped taking my medication because I went on 2 or 3 hikes and it felt great and I didn't need it anymore. And I'm like, no, don't do that. Bad, very bad. Don't stop doing those things unless prescribed by your practitioner. But great that you're getting out there and great that you're seeing improvement. Now let's talk with the professionals and the people you work with to see what we can do. Maybe some adjustments need to be made. Maybe you're going every other week to see your therapist instead of every week. I started going hiking at the prescription of my therapist. She was like, "Go for a damn hike." I'm like, "Okay." I'm like, "Wow, this is great. I love this." So yeah, it's different for different people, but just for me, realizing that I am nature, and what I was really looking for was something bigger than myself, and having that interconnectedness. And I'm in Ashland, very woo woo, very, we're all connected to the earth, kind of pantheist ideology, which, people, think, oh, that's just woo woo new age stuff. And I get that. But at the same time, it's like, but we are connected and we are a part of something bigger, this bigger system. And call it the universe, call it nature, call it Mother Earth, call it whatever you want. It's there. And we're a part of it, and we need to take care of it. And it just gives me meaning and purpose that I was looking for. And so I just enjoy, like, even just today, before I get here, I went to the river. I put on my headphones I do the calm app and meditation. I'm watching the river go by and I'm doing the meditation and grounding myself. Like, that's a lot easier to do next to a river in nature than it is in the middle of the city. It really is. And it does amazing things for my mental health. So I don't know if I answered the question or not, but yeah.
No, you absolutely did. And there's so much there that I think we could dive into and that I relate to. As someone who has struggled with their mental health, I've been diagnosed with both anxiety and depression, and have found the outdoors to be incredibly healing for a lot of those similar reasons. But again, not a replacement, just a supplement for other things. But just as you were talking, it was reminding me of a conversation I actually had with my dad, who's a mountaineer, and raised me to love the outdoors and stuff. But he's a very spiritual person. He's identifies with the Christian faith, and we had a conversation about how the outdoors can be this great unifier, because kind of like what you were saying, it does make you feel like you are part of something bigger than yourself, and that doesn't need to mean God. It doesn't need to mean even spirituality. It doesn't need to mean a specific religion or anything like that. But there is something special about this thing that is bigger than ourselves, and being able to kind of come together over that, regardless of our religious background. And we talked a little bit about that. And I wonder if that's something that you resonate with and you've kind of found, especially after your departure from the church as well.
I think to a certain extent, with certain Christians, I would say, unfortunately, and this is I'm painting with a broad stroke here, but having been an evangelical pastor for 15 years, I feel like I can speak to this.
Yeah.
There is within that culture a disrespect for the environment.
Oh, interesting.
There really is, about essentially because of their end time theology that the world is ending, Jesus is coming back, and he's going to judge the world with fire. So we're just helping it along. Literally, I've had people tell me that.
Wow.
God's going to judge her with the fire anyway, so we're just helping it along. But I think there are definitely strands of Christianity, and I've met them. There are pastors who are LGBTQ affirming and who are very much environmentalists. Who they have the cross and the LGBTQ flag outside their church, which is great. I love them. I don't necessarily prescribe to that, but they are friends of mine, who I discovered after I left evangelicalism. And yes, I think there is a unifying factor. I think even within like the left-right divide, I've worked with the Center for Western Priorities, where we're encouraging people to vote for conservation environmentalism, whatever that means for you. So that means the hunter or the fisher, which I don't hunt and fish, and I don't have a problem hunting and fishing as long as you do it legally and responsibly. The hunter and fisher wants the same things as the hiker and the kayaker. We want these lands to be preserved. We want these lands to be protected. We want them to be pristine. We don't want overfishing or overhunting, or there to be, burn scars so severe that life can never grow back there again. We want these lands to be maintained and taken care of. That's a unifying factor for us, because we all get something out of the outdoors. We all get something about being out in nature. Whether you're dressed in REI gear, Lululemon, or camo, it doesn't matter. We get something out of it. And there is a great unifying factor out there. Now, there are forces out there that are pushing against that. Corporate forces that infiltrate religious groups and political parties that want to extract for profit, whether that be oil or timber or water or whatever. And they are definitely influencing religious organizations and political parties, unfortunately. But when you get down to it, people want the river protected. They want the resources there. They want there to be bountiful amounts of trout and not the rivers to be overfished so they can enjoy their activity of fishing. They want these trails to have, plenty of streams running through them so they can get water when they're hiking the Pacific Crest Trail, whatever it is. So there's a huge unifying factor there. But we also have to recognize that there are forces out there that are trying to extract, and to do that, they have great influence over politics and religion that we need to recognize.
Yeah, that's a great perspective. I want to pivot a little bit and talk about one of the things that I've heard you say is, how you are not going outdoors necessarily to like achieve a specific fitness goal or like accomplish a certain thing. You're mostly going out there to be communing with nature and to, work on improving your mental health. But I think a lot of people, when they maybe are just beginning with their outdoorsy relationship with nature, with hiking, whatever it might be, have this misconception about like, oh, if I go for a hike, it's solely for me to
Mm-hmm.
beat the time, on all trails, the average time, or it's
Yeah.
solely for me to lose weight or whatever it might be. Like the people kind of get in this mindset that there's like these specific physical goals, and if you're not accomplishing something like that, then your activity outdoors is not, valid or real. But obviously, we know that there's so much more beyond that. So I'd love to
Mm-hmm.
hear just your perspective on that, of like the other benefits and kind of the way people can kind of shift their mindset to heal that relationship with how they view the outdoors.
The outdoors doesn't care about numbers. The outdoors doesn't care about the number on your tag, on your clothing, doesn't care about the number on the scale, doesn't care about the number of miles you can or cannot hike or the time you hiked it in. Does not care. Now, I have friends who are all about FKTs, fastest known times, and that's great for them. They are ultra marathoners, and that's their thing, and that's what motivates them to get out there. Where you cross the line is where you think everyone else needs to be that way as well. Everyone else needs to be trying to improve their time. And that's a huge temptation for me just getting into the outdoors. Oh, I need to hike so many miles. I need to, lose the weight. I need to do this or that. Especially when I first got into the outdoors, I couldn't find clothing that fit me. So, I need to hike more to downsize so I can fit into these brands' clothing. Well, that's changed. And so while there's nothing wrong with hiking for fitness, there's beauty in moving your body, in joyful movement. People can do it for other reasons, just like people can go to the gym just because they enjoy working out. Their goal is not to hit a certain weight or minutes on the treadmill at the gym. Their goal is to go to the gym and move their body, just like your goal is to go outside and enjoy nature, commune with nature. With that said, I've recently announced I'm going to be hiking the Oregon section of the Pacific Crest Trail this summer to raise awareness for the mental health crisis in Oregon. There are some specific fitness goals that I'm wanting to hit now because I got to go hike 456 miles. So I'm doing specific exercises, specific things. Not because I want to lose the weight. My point is to get stronger and keep myself from getting hurt while on the trail. Keeping my body at the best condition it can be at. And people will always, for some reason, make that connection like, oh, you're out there because you're trying to make yourself skinnier, you're trying to make yourself smaller. After my first year having gone viral, people are like, oh, you've done all this hiking, you haven't lost the weight. Oh my gosh, what's your problem? And there's a lot of reasons for that. Every body is different. People's bodies respond differently to different things. There are people who can try and then diet and exercise. I think of my wife who has PCOS. You do all the diet and exercise you want, and you can be putting yourself down to 500 calories a day and then you'll gain 5 pounds. Bodies are different. With that said, I just recently posted a reel of my first viral reel of going for a stupid hike for a stupid mental health to most recent one that went viral of me at a waterfall in the Columbia River Gorge. I'm about, trigger warning, I'm going to talk about my weight here for a second. I'm about 70 pounds lighter now than I was then. And everyone's like, oh my gosh, look at all the weight you've lost. Like, I don't care. I don't. It doesn't matter to me. I'm stronger now than I was. Physically, that's my goal, to be stronger. I am much stronger now. I can go out in the wilderness and get over a blowdown or things more quickly, more easily. But it's not about the weight. It's about communing with nature. And everybody's goals in the outdoors is different. If you want to make it a part of your fitness routine, that's fine. And everyone has different goals for their health, and that's between you and your doctor. And if weight loss is a part of that, that's between you and your doctor. But going in the outdoors is not for losing weight. That's not like the main thing. It's for being in the outdoors. And byproduct of that can be your body physically changes. There's a friend of mine who is an outdoor river guide, and she's a part of the plus size community. And recently this person had talked about how because of their job, they have to literally pull people out of a river on a raft. They've begun to do more exercise and their body is changing. And there are people in the plus size community like, oh my gosh, you're selling out. It's like, no, my job is to lift 250 pound dudes out of a river. I need to get stronger, and my body has changed as such because I love my job and I want to do this well in the outdoors. With that said, people just need to mind their own damn business with other people's bodies. Like, my body, my choice, in all aspects. Let me do what I need to do. You don't need to comment on it. And even, people, they try to be complimentary, and I'm like, I always say, I respectfully ask that you don't make a comment about my physical appearance. I appreciate the sentiment, but I'm out here to encourage people to get in the outdoors, not to show that I'm in a different size now, or I'm lighter, heavier, or whatever. Me showing my body out in the outdoors is to encourage other people that all bodies can be in the outdoors. That the outdoors is for everybody, and not just the outdoor ads, the Mountain Dew. I used to say this all the time, the Mountain Dew ads with the dude with the 8-pack on a climber's rope, out there grabs a Mountain Dew and drinking it down as he's pulling up a mountain, whatever. That's not what it means to be outdoorsy. Outdoorsy means to be in the outdoors. That's for all body types. And also we need to talk about how, those who aren't able-bodied, those who are in the disabled community also enjoy the outdoors, and that looks differently for them. I have many friends who are in the disabled community who are enjoying the outdoors in their ways, and they want more access as well. And, that looks different for them than it does for someone who, like myself, who is able-bodied. So the outdoors, it has its physical benefits, it has its mental benefits, but it's between you and the outdoors.
I was talking to another one of my podcast guests, Laura Brooks. She's a outdoor boudoir photographer and really focuses specifically on helping people who are in bodies that have been historically marginalized, like specifically plus size people, queer people, feel comfortable in their bodies outdoors. And she said something that I agree with. She was like, the size of my body is like the least interesting thing about me.
Yes.
She was like,
yes.
It's a part of who I am, obviously, and really impacts how I move through the world and how people perceive me and treat me. But it's not the most interesting thing about me. I've got a lot of other interesting things that I've got going on. Like, let's talk about that instead.
Yep.
And I think that that's similar to what you're saying here too. And I think the other thing too is with outdoor activities, when we are moving our bodies and we are more physical, sometimes your body might change, but your weight, doesn't.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
I mean,
Yep.
when I've been training for my half marathons, I've gained weight and my body looks thinner or looks more
Yep.
lean. And, it's none of it matters.
Yep.
Like really,
It does not matter.
It doesn't. So, but I mean, I think that that's probably easier for you and I to say because we have done a lot of work to like recognize this in ourselves and have really expanded our mindset and stuff. But I think that there are still a lot of people who still are getting fed, whether it's through the social media algorithms or through the brands that they're interacting with, like not carrying clothes and gear that work for their bodies or whatever it might be. They're being fed this lie that only a certain type of person can exist in the outdoors.
Yeah.
And so that creates this barrier for them to want to even start, to want to
Yeah.
even go out and do anything. So what advice would you have for someone who is feeling that way, who is like, I don't even want to like start because either I'm afraid of being seen, or I can't find gear that doesn't fit me, or I'm not seeing myself represented. Like I feel hopeless, or I feel like just this isn't the space for me. Like what would you say to those people?
First of all, I'd say that your feelings are valid, and those are real, genuine concerns. And I have felt those things. I know when I first started getting in the outdoors, there's a story I tell all the time. I was with my son, and we had hiked up. It was about 11 miles, Wagner Butte, 3,000 feet of elevation gain. Climbed up to the top. It was beautiful. We began to climb down, and we came upon some other hikers. And we had to stop real quick. My son needed some water, and she's like, "Oh, how far did you make it up?" And like, we made it all the way up. And she looks at both of us and looks at me and looks me over. Both of you? Yep. The whole way up? Yep. We're on our way down. And it was just like, those things happen. There are microaggressions that happen to people in bigger bodies in the outdoors. There's the, oh, almost there. Good job. You know, you can do it. Great for you to be out here. And you get that. And then there are people literally who will belittle you and make fun of you. I've had that happen as well. And those are real concerns. Clothing is a real concern. It's changing. It is definitely changing. For women, Alder Apparel is doing amazing things. Columbia Sportswear, Nike, they're putting the clothes out there. Now, I've been advocating for it to be in store, so we can try them on. That's my next thing. Those are happening. Packs. REI is making plus size packs. Osprey is making plus size packs. Gregory Mountain Products is making plus size packs. Those things are happening, but it's slow. But I will say this: someone who they're afraid to get out there because of those reasons, give it a shot. And you don't have to go hike the Pacific Crest Trail on your first day. Find a green space near your house and walk around. Find a place near you. Maybe if you can get away for a lunch break or on a weekday where it's not very crowded, and just get comfortable in the outdoors. If that just means getting a camping chair and just sitting by a river or a lake and or by huge trees or wherever and just being there and getting comfortable being in the outdoors, do that. You don't have to go out and conquer the trail or conquer a mountain, which having the idea of conquering nature is a whole other thing rooted in colonialism. Just get out in nature. Find groups, find like-minded individuals. There are so many hiking groups out there for plus-size individuals, as well as women, the BIPOC community, to help you feel more comfortable that there are other people like you. Groups like Unlikely Hikers that is doing amazing work, not only for doing the hikes and getting people out there, but Jenny is advocating to the brands about these issues, and they're listening because they have to. One thing I always say is these brands are not above our fat dollars. It's money either way to them, and they're losing money by not serving the plus size community. Brands like Gregory Mountain Products has discovered that, and they have a bigger variety of plus size packs than any other brand right now because they were the first. And they realized how profitable it was. Like, oh crap, we're leaving money on the table here. Let's make more. And they oftentimes have trouble keeping those in stock. And so your feelings are valid. It's a real struggle. There will be microaggressions. You put yourself out there online, there'll be a lot. But one thing I have discovered, there was one person with kind of a fitness guru on Instagram totally making fun of me, saying I was a fat slob, all this stuff. I saw her at the gym. I didn't even realize she lived in my town. She was real quiet when she saw me. And I started going, oh, I'll get my treadmill over where she's working at. She ran away. People are a lot bolder online than they are in person. That's just a little side that was for free. Yeah. But the feelings are real. The struggles are real. And one thing for me is just connecting with community, knowing that I am not alone. Now it's harder for me for that to happen in person because I live in a smaller area. But there's the online community. Parasocial relationships are real. There is a difference between real life. I get that. But just I was so encouraged by seeing people like unlikely hikers and other plus size hikers and outdoor persons out there. Oh, I can do this. And that's what spurred me on to like, you know what? I need to put myself out there and become a plus size model. You know, I have a freaking agent for modeling now. Like that's just crazy and weird. Like that was not on my life bingo card when I was 18. You know, I'm going to be a plus size model for the outdoor industry. The fat city kid, you know, who never thought he'd amount to anything, you know, in the fashion industry is now, you know, you go to Columbia Sportswear's employee store, there's a picture of him right there, you know, looking towards a big waterfall, like, you know, get a coupon from Columbia, like, oh, there it is. You know, open up REI's website. So there I am modeling backpacks. So it's weird, but it's cool. And the benefits, I guarantee, far outweigh the drawbacks. And eventually those voices, they get drowned out by nature. They get drowned out by the sound of the waterfall or the silence you experience amongst the redwood forests or wherever it is you recreate or enjoy nature. Because it's like, who cares? They're projecting their own insecurities, their own fat phobia on you, and they have their own work they need to do. And I always try to respond with kindness. Sometimes I get a little I don't want to say mean, but you know, people comment on my Instagram. I'll just go ahead and pin that comment at the top and everyone will see it and that person will know not to mess with me because my followers are fiercely loyal to me. And then they'll message me, please unpin that, because when you pin a comment on Instagram, it can't be deleted. I'm like, okay, be nice to me next time, please. So that's just me.
One of the things that I'm hearing you talk about though is that if you are looking for community, it exists out there. I mean,
It does.
this is a through line that I've seen with a lot of the interviews that I've been doing is if you're part of a community, whether that be a marginalized one or even just if you're like looking for some niche community, like there's probably like people who like to knit in the outdoors. There's a group for that, you know,
Mm-hmm.
like there's a community for everybody. And yeah, some of those might be online, some of those might not be local to you, but really when you do have something that you are like, well, this is really important to me, generally there's actually somewhere out there that already exists. And if not, you should feel empowered to create your own local group or if you want,
Yeah.
if you feel comfortable doing that and safe doing that. And one of the things too that I've noticed, at least with like my online content, obviously you have a much bigger platform than I do. But even I will get hate comments or rude, you know, comments from people about my body or whatever it might be. And sometimes I think that people might see those comments and think that that's the majority of people. But like you were just saying, you're able to pin that nasty comment and have them be eviscerated by your followers because that's actually the minority of people that are
Yep.
shitty like that. The
Yep.
majority of the people in this community and in these online spaces, especially if they are cultivated around a shared understanding of inclusivity, are going to be good people and are going to have your back, even though it seems like sometimes these negative voices are the loudest. It's actually usually not the case, that they're the majority. They're just
Yep.
really loud. So hopefully people can find a little bit of comfort knowing that there's few and far between. Yes, there are
Yeah.
assholes out there, but there's way more good people.
Yeah. I mean, just to that point, there was a comment on my last viral reel, somebody making fun of my size and how I was a cringy influencer. And I just pinned the comment, didn't say anything. There was 2,000 responses in my defense.
Yeah.
2001, I think it's a pretty good ratio.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. Pay attention to those ratios for sure. I love it. So I wanna talk about something that we haven't quite touched on yet, which I do think is a really important conversation to be had, which is I think there's something to be said about how you are a man in the outdoorsy community, and
Mm-hmm.
oftentimes in these spaces that often, you know, favor men or are really catered to men, sometimes they can get really toxic,
Oh,
and
yeah.
there can be a lot of that macho toxic masculinity that's really prevalent in the outdoorsy community. You see it all the time. And it's unfortunate, but then it's so refreshing to hear someone like you come on and be vulnerable and be open about mental health and be like, this is not it, guys. Like,
Yeah.
let's change the conversation. Let's change this culture. But I do think that there's a really important conversation here to be had about men and masculinity in the outdoors, and I just would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Oh gosh. Well, thank you for recognizing that. I appreciate that. It's something I've been striving for, deconstructing toxic masculinity, especially with my religious background, where you're literally taught from a young age that as a man, you are above women, that queer people are abominations, and things like that. And that's ingrained into you at a young age. And deconstructing that has been a process. Deconstructing homophobia, chauvinism, toxic masculinity. And it's a lot of work. But I think, first of all, just realizing the damage that toxic masculinity did for my own mental health, because I never felt particularly what would be considered manly. I was always more into the arts. I was always more into art and culture, even when I lived in the city. I mean, I loved going to museums and things like that. I love music. I love, film and cinema. And people said, "Oh, you're gay." No, I just like going to film festivals and going to art museums. And, I don't like, I get together with my guy friends and they'd be doing drinking games and hooting and hollering. And I'd be like, yeah, I'll just sit here in the corner. It just wasn't me. It just wasn't me. But I was told that was supposed to be me. It just wasn't me. I'd see friends of mine treat women horribly or treat people in the queer community horribly, and they laugh about it. I'm like, why is that? It just never resonated with me. And I always thought I was different or weird because I didn't like subjugating women. I didn't think it was a good idea. Even in my background, even as a pastor, I would teach it that, the man is the head of the household, women are just, I would teach this because that's what I was told to teach. And that's what I was told the Bible says. And as I've deconstructed that and gone into the outdoors, I've seen that same kind of toxic masculinity, that as men are supposed to conquer the outdoors, we're supposed to hunt and fish, and nothing wrong with hunting and fishing, that these spaces are for us to be men and manly, and they're masculine spaces. One of the first ways I realized this was after I went viral on my first reel. I drive a Honda CRV, and a whole grip of these dudes from this truck club start commenting on the reel. What kind of and they're using expletives. What kind of a truck is that? What are you? This, that, you girl, you need to do. I'm like, it's a Honda. I got it because it's practical. It has all-wheel drive, and it gets me to where I need to go. Like, it has enough storage in the back. I can put my gear back there. I don't need something lifted off the ground, with tires that are 3 feet high. I don't need that. And just realizing that permeates in the outdoors. And the outdoors in the United States and Western America has traditionally been a space for cis het white dudes. Friends like my friend Acuna, Will Robinson, who the first known black male to do the Triple Crown. There's places where he hikes where he doesn't feel welcome as a black man, and he has to struggle with that. There are places where my queer friends, my friend Cal, who was the first known trans person to hike the Triple Crown, all three of the major United States trails, who has ran across America for trans rights, they do not feel comfortable in certain places because of that permeating toxic masculinity, that we have to be out here and that we have to hunt, fish, and camp and conquer nature. But nature is not ours to conquer. We are nature. We're a part of it. We're interconnected. And just letting people know that these spaces are for everybody. And though when you think of the outdoors, especially where I live in a more rural part of Southern Oregon, where you think outdoors, you think big trucks and camo. And not that there's anything wrong necessarily with big trucks and camo. I think of current vice presidential candidate Tim Walz, who I actually love, because here's a guy who wears camo, he hunts, he fishes, but he loves his daughter who's a vegetarian and accepts her. He was a teacher. He was accepting. He started in the 90s, started the LGBTQ plus alliance at his school in frickin', Minnesota. Like, wow. I see that, and I'm like, I see myself in him. I'm like, here's a dude who has all the privilege in the world, hunt and fish, but he sees how toxic masculinity is messed up, but he's still masculine, but not in this toxic way. And it's what works for him. And one thing I'm always advocating is that what it means to be a man for me looks differently necessarily than what it means to be a man for somebody else. And there's no one way to be masculine. And that's not to say that maybe more traditional expressions of masculinity are bad, but they're not required. And by traditional displays of masculinity, I mean like hunting and fishing and wearing camo. Those things are whatever. That's fine. You can do those things. Not my thing, really. But when you begin to subjugate people for who they are, where they come from, how they identify, who they love, that becomes very colonial. It becomes very just like, we are going to put ourselves on you. When you start having to be like, oh, we're going to make laws to control other people's bodies, women's bodies. And then that permeates into the outdoors. We're going to conquer nature. We're going to not take care. We're going to leave lots of traces. We're not going to not leave no trace. It really becomes toxic and horrible. And then these spaces become unsafe for queer folk, women, people of color, plus size folks. I often say the outdoors is for everybody, but not everybody feels safe because of white cis het dudes who think it's theirs to conquer, think it's their space, and also just recognizing that these spaces altogether weren't ours to begin with. Where I live, the Tacoma people were here millennia before I was here, before my ancestors were here, and it's something I always want to recognize. They saw themselves as a part of nature, as a partner with nature. A place I go where I went and meditated this morning, it was a sacred place to the Tacoma people, where they had their salmon ceremony every year. And it's a beautiful, wonderful thing. I love how the indigenous cultures related with nature, and nature wasn't necessarily feminine or masculine, it was. And it's a beautiful thing. So really understanding your own biases, understanding where you're coming from, and understanding that what it means to be male for you, if you're a dude, is different than what it means to be for somebody else. And your expression of masculinity, as long as it doesn't subjugate other people, is fine, as well as somebody else's. And that's hard. That's so hard, because when you get amongst a group of guys, you want to be, grunting and hollering and, who can drink the most and all this BS. But it's cool now, I go to PCT days and I talk with my guy friends there, who I don't get to see very often. We're all, influencers or well-known hikers, and we talk, and, some of us are queer, some of us are straight, some of us are black, some of us are Latinx, and we just talk about, going to therapy. That's awesome. Like, who does that? Dudes don't get together and talk about their therapists, but it's just cool to do that and to say, hey man, I'm a text away. You need me, and to feel comfortable, embracing a fellow man, and not where like, oh, they think I'm gay. Well, so who cares if they do, first of all, but second of all, that we can have as men, physical touch in relationships that aren't sexualized. Like, that's okay. And I can go on forever about this, but just understanding that what it means to be male and masculine is different for everybody. And the outdoors has just been a place that has been so colonialized by white cis het dudes that other people don't feel safe, and it has kind of been this hotbed for just toxic masculinity, and that's changing. As such, a lot of dudes don't like that. They don't like it when they're hiking and they or hunting or fishing, and they see women, plus size folks, queer folks, people of color, and those people are scared. People in the marginalized communities are scared. I think of a part where I was hiking at a remote waterfall, and I had like a trucker hat on, I'm a big dude, and I come around a corner and I see this biracial couple taking a picture of the waterfall, and I look in their eyes the second they see me. Big white dude, trucker hat on. They don't know, is this dude safe or not? And there's this fear in their eyes. So I immediately have to go, oh, hey, is this waterfall beautiful? Hey, you guys should try to, when we take a picture of you guys? And just, I really ham it up because I'm realizing I need to make sure they understand I'm a safe person. Because I saw that fear in their eyes. And I remember that day I realized I can never fully understand what it must be like to be a woman or a person of color or a queer person in the outdoors, not knowing if the next person around the next switchback is safe or not. And I can go on forever about this, but that's my 2 cents.
I love it. I do think that maybe we, got to come back for another episode. We could just do a deep dive on this particular topic. Honestly, I think it's so important. And the amount of work that you've done to deconstruct all these ideals that you had ingrained in you and taught and everything, it's really remarkable how far you've come since that, and
Appreciate that.
how well you're able to articulate these things. I think it's beautiful, and that that conversation around male friendship too in the outdoors, I think is really important. Because yeah, you should be able to have heart to heart conversations with your male friends and
Hmm.
not have it be, talked down on or seen as silly or whatever. It should be normalized. And so, yeah, I think this is a really important conversation to be had. And like also what you were saying about how masculinity looks different for everybody. I mean, it just is different for every person, just like how femininity is different for every person. It's just as long as you're not harming other people,
Yeah.
that's what's important.
Yeah.
So I do want to kind of close on a more positive note and think about, as a last kind of tying a bow on all these topics and stuff, for anybody who is struggling because either they exist in a marginalized body or they have had bad experiences with the outdoorsy community, or maybe they're just don't even know where to start with becoming, one with nature and exploring, hiking, whatever it might be that looks good and feels good for them. What's your kind of final piece of advice for anybody who is struggling, feeling included in the outdoorsy community?
I would say that a few things. One, you're not alone, and those feelings are valid. And there are communities of people out there. Second thing, I would say, you know what? You're having those fears, and those are valid fears. If this is a possibility for you, consider going to therapy and exploring those. Now, I say that knowing that there are barriers to therapy, financial barriers, geographical barriers. I'm currently fighting in Oregon for more access. Oregon has one of the worst mental health care systems in the country. I literally was emailing back and forth with the state senator right before I got on here about what we need to do about that. I have another meeting at noon today with the state representative about that. So there are definitely barriers to access, whether it be geographical, financial, but helping deconstruct those things with a therapist who's a fit for you, if that's a possibility, I'd say that's something to at least explore. And then also I'd say find community, find groups, find other people, follow those accounts. Now, parasocial relationships are different than in real life relationships. I get that. And then get out there. Get out there if it's safe for you to do so. Whether that's just finding your local city park and walking around, or finding a green space by a river, mountain, wherever you live. I realize, everyone's coming from different places in the country and world. Get out there and do it, because it is scary, but there's something about taking that first step and getting out there and putting your foot on a trail or on a mountain or in grass. That's so liberating and so freeing. One thing I'm very passionate about is advocating for green spaces in urban areas. There are places you can hike in San Francisco, in Denver, in Portland, in Los Angeles, where you go and you don't even realize you're in the middle of the city. And we need to utilize those spaces if you're in those urban areas, because if we're not utilized, the funding goes away and then those spaces go away. Find those spaces, get out there. That first step is the hardest. But there are millions of people who are like you, who are rooting you on, who want you to join them in the outdoors, because it is so freeing and it's so beneficial for your mental and your physical health. Um, just connecting with nature, because we are nature, and there's something about connecting with that that is life changing. So community, taking that first step, getting out there, and begin deconstructing that stuff with therapists if that's available to you. I understand that. I always want to recognize and leave space for the fact that especially in the United States, that there's a huge barrier to entry there for a lot of people.
I hope everybody listening to this really takes that advice to heart. Um, and yeah, and I think, you don't have to do everything all at once. You can take
Yep.
small steps, and that
Yep.
first step can just be talking to somebody about it. It can be as simple as just going to your local park. But yeah, start somewhere.
Yep. Yep.
Um, well, Andy, this was just amazing. Usually when I'm recording these podcasts, I'm thinking about, oh, that's going to be a good soundbite, or like that will be a good little clip. And this whole interview has just been one long, like,
I
oh,
appreciate that. Thank you.
I'm like, that was so good. Um, but really, I mean, what you said is so impactful and so meaningful, and I think that there's a lot to be learned from this episode. So, hopefully, people take a lot away from this, because I know I did, and just really appreciate your time and you sharing your wisdom with us in such a approachable way. So, thank you.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate that.
So what's next for you? What future projects, things you've got coming up? Like what do you want to share with us that you've got coming up?
Oh gosh. So at the behest of my followers, I'm finally beginning group hikes. So I'm just calling them stupid hikes for stupid mental health. Doing the first one here coming in October, along the Pacific Crest Trail, just a 3-mile loop. I try with all the group hikes I'm going to be doing that they are as accessible as possible. That there's not a huge transportation issues, or we're not doing 14 miles with 5,000 feet of elevation gain, just super flat, and just getting out in nature, enjoying nature and cool spots, and hanging out with cool like-minded people. Also getting ready to work on, we're doing pre-production for a documentary about mental health in the outdoors, which are going to ruffle some feathers, and the timeline on that's probably years, but we're beginning pre-production and getting contracts signed for that. I'm excited. Also, I am hiking the Oregon section of the Pacific Crest Trail this summer to raise awareness for the mental health crisis in Oregon. Having adopted 3 kids from foster care, 2 with special needs and with mental illness, we've discovered how horrible the mental health care system is in the United States, but especially Oregon. We rank 51 out of 51 for children and teens. Most people are shocked when they hear that number, because when you think Oregon, you think very progressive state. In a lot of ways we are, but in a lot of ways we aren't. And I want to raise awareness to that. And even just announcing that, I have ruffled a lot of feathers in the state government, and because they don't like people knowing that fact. But it's something that needs to be addressed. So hiking that this summer, got a lot of support. Currently training for that, and then just creating cool content, relatable content, fun content. Whether it's just like me and my daughter, prancing around in Halloween costumes we did this last week, in the park, or talking about the mental health crisis or toxic masculinity, or just fun videos I like to do, going for a stupid hike for your stupid mental health, which some reason people still resonate with and they still go viral. I don't know why. Aren't you all sick of it yet? Seriously, I'm not sick of doing them, but like seriously, like you guys keep watching these things, so it's great.
I'm so excited. All those projects sound so incredible, and I'm really curious to certainly hear more about the documentary as plans kind of solidify and stuff. And I know you mentioned with both of the documentary and with kind of raising awareness about the terrible state of mental health resources in Oregon. You mentioned both of those things have ruffled some feathers, and I'm a
Mm-hmm.
firm believer that if you're not ruffling some feathers, you're not doing it right. So I think that, it's good. Ruffle those feathers. I look forward to supporting you and cheering you on along all these endeavors, and I hope that any of the listeners and followers of this podcast feel like they can go follow you on all the things. I will have all of your links in the show notes for this episode, wherever you are listening. So you can go click through, follow along Andy's adventures, and support you. And then anybody else who is wanting to engage with this outdoorsy community further too, you can become a Patreon subscriber of this podcast and join the Discord community, which is again like a safe, inclusive online community. So if you are unable to get out in person and be around community, that's a great way to kind of dip your toes into outdoorsy community with like-minded individuals. So the link for that will be in the show notes too. But Andy, thank you so much.
Thank you.
This
I
was
appreciate it.
amazing. Thank you. I feel like we could have talked for a lot longer, so maybe we got to have you on for a follow-up episode, but
I'll be
thank
here.
you,
I'll
thank
be
you,
here.
thank you.
Thank
I
you.
really appreciate it.
All right.
Well, that's it for this episode of Outdoorsy. I hope that everybody listening at home feels empowered to just get out there in whatever way feels good to them. And please just remember that you belong out there.